Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, hi everyone. My name's Christian. I'm going to talk a bit about using LiDAR surveys to find first descents, and a bit about some of the canyons that I've found, and a comparison of what we expected to find based on the LiDAR versus how it actually turned out.
Hey Christian, sorry, just see, are you in presentation mode? I can still see your bookmark bar and things. Is it all full screen down the bottom, next to 100%?
Oh, is that better?
Better, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so a bit of background. Before you get to do any canyoning on the first descent, you have to find some potential options, which is very hard until you see something in person. So the best way to find potential new canyons has always been to just have lots of friends who do tramping or something so they can tell you where the canyons are. But you can do a bit of research yourself. So traditionally we would look at topo maps, satellite imagery, and geological maps. This is Archduchess Canyon in Lewis Pass. What you normally look at for topo maps is you look at known canyons and you look at the terrain shapes around them and you try to find other creeks that have a similar kind of terrain shape. And one of the main things you look for is a hanging valley. This is quite a good example. You've got a big basin that will collect floodwaters, and then you've got this steep section at the bottom where the actual canyon is. So you look for that, but not every canyon is in a hanging valley. Not every hanging valley is a canyon. It's just a common thing that you would look for. You would also look at satellite imagery. Sometimes you can see waterfalls on satellite imagery, but usually, like this one in here, usually if you can see too much, it shows that it's quite open. So this has always just been an indication as well. Sometimes it's actually better if you can't see anything, because it means that the creek is nice and narrow and covered over by the trees. That means it might be a canyon. Geological maps give you a good idea of what area to look at, but not specifically which creeks. So the new tool we've been using is the LiDAR surveys. So hopefully a few people have seen this website already. This is Delin's Base Maps. So this just gives you a 3D model of the terrain, and you can just look around for canyons. So it's not all that high tech. You just look at the website. So LiDAR survey is someone will fly a plane or helicopter over an area, and they'll have basically a laser rangefinder detecting the height of the ground at a bunch of different points, and you can put all the data together into this 3D model. You don't have to do anything. All the data has been collected by Land Information New Zealand. They have it available on this website, and you can also download the data to use with the GIS program. A lot of the time, this website is actually all you really need to tell if something is or isn't a canyon. So the first example I've got, this is McKay Creek in the Eglinton Valley, so right next to the Milford Road. This is quite a good example because it's probably the most obvious canyon I've seen on the LiDAR. You can immediately tell that it's a deep, narrow slot. You can't really tell what any of the features are in here, just because it's too narrow, but you can immediately tell that this is worth looking at. You can even see there's a few points where it looks like there's a bridge over the canyon. That's not a bridge, it's just where the sides are so close together that when the model is made, it thinks that the sides are connected. So a few photos. This is McKay Creek. I've got the date and the names of everyone involved for each of these canyons in the text. This is a beautiful canyon. I was really optimistic about this one. It's similar catchment length and height to Cross Creek in Hast Pass. So for some reason, I thought it would be the same. I know this is obviously a very different shape and different rock type, but I was sure this was going to be 3 stars. And you can see in the photos, the creek carries a lot of rocks, a lot of gravel, so none of the pools are deep. So there's very few swims, certainly no jumps. It's still an outstanding canyon, but that kind of just goes to show a lot of the quality of a canyon is not determined by things that you can necessarily see from the LiDAR. So it can help you spot what might be a canyon, but it can be you're always in for a surprise on what the features will be like. The other interesting thing about this one is it's right next to the road here. And the Eglinton Valley is an area that's been looked at by canyoners for quite a long time. There's a lot of known canyons in the area. And somehow this one has been missed. I think it's just because it's not really visible from the road. And while it does have kind of the right shape on the topo map, it's not super obvious. So I think people had just not looked at this one and instead looked at other ones. But now with the LiDAR, we can see this really clearly, and we've had a chance to do a canyon that had been missed until now. So next thing we're going to look at, this is the portal that you can download the GIS data from the LINS website. We're looking at this because it shows you the map of where is actually covered with the LiDAR data at the moment. So most of the North Island, minus a couple of blobs in there. Annoyingly, Queenstown and Wanaka is not covered, and that's probably one of the areas that we're most interested in. This area around Dunedin isn't, and most of Fiordland isn't, although the main thing is the Milford Road is covered, which is kind of the accessible part of Fiordland anyway. So if you move too far on this map, you might get to the mountains. We'll lose a bit of detail, they'll look kind of smoothed over. That's because it's just had to switch to a less detailed layer. Okay, so using the data in a GIS program, I'm using QGIS. There are lots of different programs you could use. QGIS is a general purpose GIS program. So GIS just means it's a software that handles geospatial data. I use this one because it's free and because it does a lot of stuff. I'm not going to talk too much about how to use it because there are a lot of resources if you want to learn, and also this does a lot of things that I don't even know about. So I'm just going to go through kind of simply what I've been doing to help look at canyons a bit closer. So the first thing is when you import the data, you just get this gray square, which you can't really tell what's going on. So first of all, change the colors and then add some contours. So on the topo map, your contours will be 20-meter intervals. Here, you just generate, there's a function in QGIS that makes the contours for you. You can specify whatever interval you want. So you can make it 1 meter or half a meter if you want. But the data is only so accurate. So at a certain point, you're just adding more lines to the map. You're not necessarily adding any more information. I found this is a pretty sensible balance here. There is other information you can get from the LINS website as well. You can get river center lines, you can get roads, and you can get walking tracks, all of which could be quite useful for planning out a potential first descent, plan your route. If you've already been somewhere and have done some scouting, you can also add a GPX track from that. Now, this canyon, I've chosen this as quite a good example because as far as I know, this is the first canyon in New Zealand to be found only from LiDAR data. There might be others I don't know about, but before this, I had used the LiDAR to look at some first descents, but it was always ones that I'd kind of known about already beforehand. But this one, I was just looking at the Lewis Pass area and just thinking there must be something else here. And I spotted this on the LiDAR. I don't think there is any way I would have noticed this just from a topo map or satellite imagery. Knowing that it's there, I can kind of think, okay, it makes sense, but I would never have spotted it. Let's have a look at the 3D view. So this is what it looks like. One of the big benefits of using a GIS program is, well, first of all, there's a little bit more detail on here than there is on the website. I think the website has to simplify it a little bit so it doesn't crash when you try to rotate large areas. This will also crash, but at least you can set it to be a higher resolution. But the main thing is actually you can measure stuff. So you can measure the height of the pitch. This first one's 19 meters, and you can go lower down. Sometimes it's a bit hard to see what's going on here, but there should be a 5-meter pitch and a 10-meter pitch. This was the other reason why I chose this example, because this one shows up extremely well on the LiDAR. You can almost make a topo beforehand of what all the drops are in here, because it's so obvious. Most of them aren't that obvious. A lot of them will be like McKay Creek, where you can see that it is a canyon, but you can't really see what any of the features are. And some of them will be, you can see maybe the biggest drop, you can see some steep contours, but you can't see everything. But this is a really, I don't know what makes it show up so well, but it does. You can measure the horizontal distance as well. There's a bit of a walking section in here. It should be about 100 meters. You've got a couple more features at the end. It's quite a short canyon. Okay. Now that we've measured everything, I've made this layer that's just got the points and the height of all the drops on it. So now you have like a to-scale visual topo of the canyon. And the great thing is you can put this QGIS project on your phone. There's an app called QField that lets you upload it onto your phone, and that will use your phone location to show where you are in relation to this, which has been an absolute game changer for first descents, because not only are you trying to explore a new canyon on the first descent, you're also potentially just trying to explore a new route to get to it. And previously we've not made it to canyons before just because we got lost in the forest. It was too hard. So having a good, much more detailed navigation than you'd have otherwise has been really helpful. But even just for known canyons, sometimes you drop in a bit too early and miss the first pitch, or drop in too late and have to do a bit of extra walking. Now you can go straight towards the pin of where you think the start of the canyon is based on the LiDAR. It's very efficient. The other thing is, if you're worried about it being hard, say in this narrow bit here, you've got two drops really close together, you want to see what's in here. If you want to scout it beforehand and abseil in and have a look, it's really easy to tell when you've got your phone location going where you are in relation to this, so you can find the right point straight away rather than having to drop in at a bunch of different places and see what you can see. So that's been extremely useful. Okay, here's a few photos of Waterfalls. It's a short canyon, but lots of fun. Got some vertical flow, a few jumps. We did this in May. It was very cold when we did it the first time, but I saw it on the LiDAR. It was so obvious, we decided we couldn't leave it until the next season. It was too promising. So this is what it'll look like on your phone, but that's not why I've chosen this example. This is 1 Mile Creek. This is quite close to Fawn Falls, just over the other side of the mountain, and it looks quite similar to Fawn Falls on the LiDAR. And you can see I've marked all these pins here of where I thought the drops were. But most of those don't really exist. The 19-meter one certainly does, and some of the smaller ones do, but a lot of those smaller ones were either just down climbs or they were just some rocks close together, and it just looked like a drop. So we spent 3 hours of doing some pretty rough bush bashing to try and get to this. We did 2 abseils, and then we did another 2 hours of walking out on the creek afterwards. It's a firm 0 stars. So it just goes to show, even though this looked pretty similar to Fawn Falls, it's not always as easy as just see the canyon, go and do it. It's not guaranteed success. You still get a few surprises from the LiDAR. All right, next example is Klondike Canyon. This is in Victoria Forest Park, so quite close to Springs Junction. First thing you might notice here is this purple dashed line. That's a dock walking track that goes right next to the canyon, right up next to the canyon rim, and you can even hear the waterfalls when you're walking up, and it's quite a popular track. So I had done this track a few years before we looked at the canyon. I think I actually remember at the time commenting that we'd hear some waterfalls, and then I immediately forgot about it. I wonder how many people have done exactly the same thing and not realized they walked straight past a canyon. I found this just looking at the area, because Victoria Forest Park has got good rock for it. It's granite and nice, and it's got these big steep-sided valleys. It really seems like canyon terrain, but there were no canyons known there until now. So when we looked at this, you can see it's very obviously a canyon, but it's actually quite hard to tell what any of the features are. So you can see in here, that's kind of a 10-meter drop at the start. You can see there's something going on in here. That round bit's probably a pool. And you see it gets a bit narrow here, and there's another 10-meter pitch in there. After that, there's a couple of kind of bumps in the ground along here, but it's hard to be certain that there's actually any more features. So that was the knowledge that we went into the first descent with, that there'd be 2 pitches and maybe some smaller stuff. Of course, it turned out extremely well. Back to the photos. This is Klondike Canyon. It ended up having a lot of small 2-3 meter jumps. It's a lot of fun. It's really easy, short, but fun canyon. We couldn't believe our luck when we found it. Looking back at the LiDAR map now, I can identify where a lot of those features were. So those small little drops at the end are, and there's like in here, this is a jump in here, but you couldn't predict that beforehand without knowing it. It could end up being just like 1 mile where you think each small drop is a feature, but actually it turns out to be nothing much. So it does seem to be common that you can find there are more features in the canyon in real life than you think they're going to be on the LiDAR, which is good. While we're here, we'll have a quick look on the other side of the valley. This is Rahu Left Canyon. This shows up a lot more obviously than Klondike. So you can immediately see this big pool here, and you can see there's like a 7-8 meter drop there. Bit of walking, you've got a 10 meter drop in here. After that, it's hard to see what else there is, but this round bit is definitely a pool, and there might be something else at the end there. So obviously we thought this one would be promising, but even so, I was a bit hesitant to do this one because we did it the day after Klondike. And when we did Klondike, we were very grateful of the dock walking track because the forest is very thick there. This one doesn't have a track, so we're expecting a couple of hours of rough bush bashing for a canyon that might only have 2 pitches. But we went to do it anyway, and the first thing we found when leaving the road was a well-worn, well-marked tape track going up the canyon rim, further up the valley. So clearly people have been walking past this for ages. And I don't know if people had never looked at the waterfalls, or if people had, but they just didn't know about canyoning, they didn't know any canyoners. But we never found out about this. But I've heard a few people say to do a first descent, you just have to be prepared to walk a bit further, to do a rough approach, to get to the stuff that no one else has looked at before. But this really shows that that's not the case. This was a pretty good canyon, and it's right next to the road. It was about 25-minute walk up, 5-minute back. And Klondike, Fawn Falls, and McKay even are all pretty similar. McKay is a bit longer and a bit bigger, but the other 3, the thing is they're all only about 50 meters of vertical between the top of the canyon and the bottom. So when you look at it on the topo map, it looks like nothing. That's 2.5 contours. So if you were looking for canyons with just topo map and satellite imagery, you'd easily just go past these. It wouldn't seem like likely to be a canyon. But now that we have more detailed information on them with the LiDAR, it's kind of opened up a new wave of canyons, which they should be quite easy to find. They're in easy locations, but just until now, with the tools we had available, they weren't that easy to find. Okay, so next example is a canyon that was not found on the LiDAR. This was found on the geological map. So on the west coast, there is a band of schist that runs up the west side of the Southern Alps. A lot of the best canyons in the west coast are in that band of schist. There's Griffin, Whirling, Dixon, a bunch of those. But it's quite hard to get to the schist because there's not that many roads on the west coast. So my idea was to go out to Hoperi near Greymouth because there's a road that goes directly across these 2 canyons here. So on the left, that's Goat Creek. We did this one before the LiDAR. It was quite obvious because it's quite steep. It has the right kind of shape in the terrain. And after doing that, we kind of thought Crane Creek is probably a canyon as well. That's got the right hanging valley shape, but this is really low angle. It's hard to really see the scale here, but each of these index contours is 50 meters. So this gully is huge. And from the start, this is about 1.5 kilometers long. And there's, can't remember, less than 300 meters of vertical across it. So we weren't sure if we were just going to be doing lots of walking, maybe not very much canyoning. So shortly before doing it, the LiDAR for this area became available, and we looked at it to kind of psych ourselves up before going in. And you can see in here, it's actually quite steep down. It's quite steep down at the bottom in places. It actually is quite kind of slotted in places. It's hard to really tell what features are in here. You can kind of see some drops, but it's hard to tell. But the main thing is you can see that there are two big drops in here. So this is about 30 meters, and there's another one of those higher up in here, very long canyon. So that showed us that if nothing else, we're not just going to be taking gear for a walk, we're going to be doing a canyon with at least 2 abseils, and that was enough. So we went and did it. And, oh, sorry, we skipped the photos for Rahu left. Yeah, really good canyon, very short, but good fun. So this is what we found at Crane Creek. It was much longer than we could have guessed from the LiDAR. So there was about 13 pitches total. This bottom right photo, which is the same as the main photo here, this is the first of those big pitches. We call it the jacuzzi. It's not particularly similar to a jacuzzi, but it's a very cool feature. All the water and spray funnels through this really narrow slot at the bottom. You can't see anything when you're in there. Very unique, very intimidating. We had a bit of an epic in this canyon, not because of the difficulty, but because of the length. I mean, we went in recognizing that we didn't know how many features were going to be in there, but we'd been walking for quite a long time when we got, and we actually thought we were quite close to the end when we got to one of the features that we recognized from the LiDAR on those bigger pictures. And that made us realize that we were actually only about 2/3 of the way through, and we did it in April, so it gets dark at about 6:30. So we started hurrying to try and get out there before it got dark. And of course, as soon as we were in a hurry, the canyon just kept getting better and better. This photo in the middle is one of the features we found just after then. So we kept finding all these awesome features and just hoping it would end soon, weirdly. So this kind of similar to Klondike. This was quite a good example of there being much more features than we expected from the LiDAR, because you just can't, when looking at small things, you can't really guess if that's, you can guess that it might be something, but you could equally be wrong. There's definitely been another one out in Victoria Forest Park somewhere where I had put down 13 drops on the map, and we ended up doing 2 pitches. So it's hard to tell when you're looking at small stuff. Okay, last example for now, because I've talked for quite a long time, is, we'll go back to the top of the map. This is Riordan's Creek in the Lewis Pass. This is one that Amy and I did. We looked at this, we walked up from the base of this to this steep section of contours here. So that's the classic thing you look for. We were hoping for some nice back-to-back waterfalls. This actually looks quite similar in shape to Victory Canyon, also in the Lewis Pass, just to the north. So I was hoping it would be a bit like that. We did find some waterfalls, but it didn't look very promising. So we turned around and we wrote this one off as a dud. And it was only about a year or so later that I was looking at the LiDAR, and we could immediately see just above where it ends, just above where we had turned around, I guess, that's where the actual canyon starts. So we'd walked right up to the good bit and then turned around. So I think this is where we got to. It's still quite open here. And then just up here turns into a real long, narrow canyon. Again, like McKay, you can't really tell what any of the features are in here, but this definitely shows you it is a canyon worth looking at. Here it is. There's a few photos. It's a V3A1, so it's not a super exciting canyon, but it was 9 pitches, hour and a half walk up. Still very worthwhile. Okay, so if anyone's thinking of doing some first descents, check out the LiDAR. It's very worthwhile. It's free, can give you a lot more information than you've got otherwise. It's been really cool recently. It's given us a lot more goals to look at, and it's opened up a lot of canyons that I would have never guessed were there beforehand. It's amazing that there are so many that have actually been quite close to get to, or in areas that people have looked at a lot before, but they just haven't been obvious until now because we haven't had the detailed maps to be able to spot them. So yeah, that's it from me. Does anyone have any questions?
Resounding silence. Well, I'll just pop up and say that's absolutely fascinating. I definitely feel as though I've had my fair share of walking blind into God knows what and finding shit canyons. So it's pretty exciting to to find an opportunity to increase that hit rate. It's awesome.
It certainly helps, but we're definitely still finding some duds. Yeah, it doesn't give too much away. You still get some surprises. It would be boring if you found a good one every time.
True enough.
If what we might do afterwards is all the little things that you referenced, all the different applications and links and so on, we could summarize those into a bit of a list with a few links and things so people can have a wee look. It'd be really cool. And so we'll get this published up on the website once I get back from -10. It'll be great.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Christian.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a bunch. That was brilliant.
Christian.
Awesome.
Yep, nice one. That was super interesting.
Thanks.
Right on.
Fantastic. Right on. Oh, well, in that case, I guess we will call this AGM to a close. Thank you so much, everyone, for turning up, and thanks a lot, Christian, for your presentation. Really appreciate it. So, see you guys in the canyon soon, I hope.
See you.
Right on. All right, thanks a lot, everyone.